Joining me on the line now is the executive chairman of Intelligent Fingerprinting company in Impington, and that's Philip Hand. Philip, you have developed, I'm told, a new portable and dignified test for coronavirus, for want of a better word.
Yeah, hi Tony. We've developed a test for COVID along similar lines to a number of other lateral flow tests, which people will be very used to now, I would think, in the community, testing for the initial screen for COVID-19. The test that we've been working on for about 10 months now uses a saliva sample rather than what's known as an anterior nares sample, so a sample from the back of the throat or the nasal passage. So in the context of it being a more sort of user-friendly test, we feel it is, and in the context of that is therefore more suitable for all members of society, ranging from children and adults right through to the elderly.
I've become quite familiar with the traditional, in inverted commas, lateral flow test because I was pinged a week or so ago and took it upon myself to have a daily test. I'd previously been doing them about twice a week. Your test is, I believe, quicker because it's about half an hour, I think, currently before you get a result, and also very much easier to use.
Yes, our test time from taking the sample to reading the result is around 20 minutes. So it's around a sort of third quicker than the current tests. They tend to be around 30 minutes. And with all of these tests, it's very important to make sure that the incubation period is fully observed before you actually read the result. In terms of ease of use, as we've just discussed, we take a saliva sample from just inside the cheek of the mouth. So, as I say, it's not as invasive. It's more comfortable and easier to use. And we hope those advantages will, as we've said, make it applicable to members of society across all demographics.
And you say saliva. What is the test actually taking? Because that going into the nose twice, I believe, and then to the back of the throat, there's obviously saliva there somewhere. But what is it that they're taking that your product doesn't do?
Well, as we've said, what they're doing is they're taking a sample of mucus from either the nasal passage or the back of the throat, normally both, and normally the back of the throat first and then the nasal passage, so that they're picking up matter from those two areas. What we're looking for in the saliva sample is obviously the virus, which will be sitting in the saliva if it's present. And then what the test does is uses a buffer similar to the tests that are on the market, but applied in a different way. And what that buffer does is break the saliva down and looks for the virus within that sample. So without going into too much sort of technical detail, which is how the virus, it relies the sample, which is how the samples break down, and then we look for the virus within the buffer. Our test is very different in its configuration to existing tests. So I think all of your listeners will be very familiar with the lateral flow concept, where you have a plastic cassette with a little aperture, and then you mix your sample, and then you put drops of that sample into the aperture, and then the fluid runs along the test cartridge. What we've done is spent some time trying to get away with all of this single-use plastic, which is from a green perspective, a really important aspect of our cartridge test design. So what we do is actually mix the sample with the buffer, as I've described, to break open the saliva and to see if any virus is there. And then we just dip the strip that normally sits in the plastic. That strip is long enough to be dipped into the sample, and then the sample travels up the strip and gives you a positive or negative result. So we're doing away with a lot of packaging, a lot of plastic, which we think from an environmental point of view is also really good.
And of course, you're testing for what everybody calls COVID-19, which originally was SARS-CoV-2.
SARS-CoV-2, that's right.
And then we've recently become familiar with the Indian variant. We had the Kent variant and so on. And they've introduced this alpha, beta, gamma, delta, and epsilon, zeta scale, the delta and epsilon, zeta scale. But that seems to have disappeared. Is your test going to work with all those variants, do you think?
We hope so. And the way these tests work is that they use antibodies to detect, antibodies of the virus to detect for it. And those antibodies are put onto the various test strips which people manufacture. And if it attaches to the antibody that's on your test strip, and that's where you get your red or whatever coloured line. So if your antibodies pairings are the recombinant protein that you're looking for in those antibodies, if they're matched with the various variants, which we believe from our work that they are, then you in good shape to actually pick up these various variants. And I know this Indian variant, as it's often described, is one that's giving grave concern at the moment and is felt as liable for the escalation in cases. We're confident that our test can pick that variant up.
It's quite a headache, this whole thing of testing. And your company is called Intelligent Fingerprinting. What did the company do originally? Something to do, presumably, with fingerprinting.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it did it originally, and it continues to do it. I mean, we developed the world's first and only, at the moment, for drugs of abuse, so illegal drugs, using the equine sweat, so using the sweat from the tip of your fingerprint. So traditionally, drug testing has been done with a urine sample or a oral fluid sample. And we've been working on the development of a fingerprint test for years. The company was originally a spin out from the University of East Anglia, and we moved to Cambridge about 5 years ago because of all the benefits of a high-tech company residing in Cambridge that brings. And it's been very, very fruitful for us doing that and being in the area. But the test itself, it's very, very small levels, picograms per nanoliter of sweat. And we use a lateral flow cartridge that is then read with a small reader. The reason we use a reader to read the cartridge is because the samples are so low, you need fluorescence to see whether the test's positive or negative. But we've had really good success with it, and we commercialised the system about 18 months ago. We're selling it to a lot of companies now in the UK, especially in the transportation and construction sectors where safety is a critical aspect of what people do. And also with the COVID pool, have really embraced the fingerprint testing technology because from a socially distancing point of view, you're A, not having to take a urine sample, and B, not having to take an oral fluid sample. So the fact that you could even administer the sample in the socially distanced environment, wearing a mask, has been a real advantage to us. And it's clean, it's non-biohazardous, and we continue to sort of grow that business. But because we've got all of that experience in lateral flow, we decided when the pandemic came along, unfortunate as it is, that we would try and help that process by developing a test which was a little bit different to the ones that were on the market.
And you mentioned commercialising. Is this something you're perhaps going to try to pitch to the government?
We may do that. I think it's got a lot of advantages for people in the UK and beyond, Europe and the United States, or well, worldwide. And in fact, it's a lot easier to transport our tests than many of the other commercially available traditional lateral flows, because we've not got this strip encased in all of this plastic. So currently, as we've said in our literature, the test will be initially for professionals to be administered by a GP or a medic or a healthcare professional. But if we can get through the right regulatory process, then we feel there's going to be a lot of benefit for this test to be used community-wide. And if that becomes the case, I'm sure many governments around the world would hopefully show a significant interest in it.
Well, another one up for Cambridge here. Brilliant work, and absolutely fascinating to hear all about your business. Philip Hand, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.